Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. Now, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because, one, as a woman of color that was in corporate spaces, this was a space that I found difficulty navigating and really had to reach out and talk to coaches and other mentors to really help me navigate those spaces. And so today we're really going to talk about what does leadership development look like, particularly for women of color. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation. My guest today is Dr. Carol Parker Walsh, who is a labor and an employment attorney and can really talk about this space. But before I just dive in, because I can talk about this and prep this for days, Dr. Carol, I want to bring you on. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So before we dive in, for folks that may not know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I absolutely did no justice just now. But tell us about yourself and why this topic is so important for you.
Yeah, well, I consider myself an organizational and human development expert. I have been in this space and doing this work for about 30 years. As you mentioned earlier, I started my career as a labor and employment attorney specializing in employment discrimination litigation. And that was quite a long time ago. So our firm was some of the first firms handling sexual harassment cases when they actually became of age in the early 90s. And I transitioned working with organizations, helping them not be sued and help them to develop practices and policies that would support equity and would support them functioning in a way that would not make them liable to lawsuits. But I wanted to transition from that and start, instead of looking at just the technicalities of it, to really look at how organizations and the people within them could develop and shift behavioral and make changes so that we could create organizations and spaces where people can thrive and flourish within those organizations. So over the years, I not only was an internal consultant, but I was an HR director and really creating and setting, kind of the pulse of the HR administration within a small transportation company I worked with. I was an internal consultant. I directed a diversity and professional development unit within an academic university. And then I went in, after I got my doctorate, I started teaching leadership and organizational development training to healthcare leaders and managers, and progressed on to directing a program, becoming an associate dean before I launched my business, really wanting to support women and women of color, specifically in how do they embrace their significance, amplify their brilliance, and really unapologetically go after what they need to go after within organizations, while helping organizations create a space that allows that to take place.
I love that. I love it. And it's so aligned with, and we talked about this, the work that we do at the equity equation. And, every now and then you'll see there's this, it's not a meme, it's a graphic, right? Of the experiences of women of color in the workplace, right? They come in and, everyone loves them. And then they start to question something and folks are like, wait a minute, you're the issue. And then the next thing you know, they're out the door. Right. Yeah. So every few years we see that. And, as you were talking, and I'm kind of reflecting on that balance, because what triggered me when I first saw that graphic was 9.999 times out of 10, the woman of color is to blame. She's the problem. And the organization does very little to change what they're doing. Right. So what I'm hearing from you is it's a balance that needs to take place. It's not just providing her with the tools and resources and support that she needs, but the organization also has to understand, right, how it's helping to manifest some of the issues and challenges that
Absolutely, how they're
they're facing.
complicit in creating the context. Nothing happens in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
Everything, I mean, part of, even my research and my doctorate work was looking at how systems interact with each other. And we as an individual system and an organization as a system, when the two come together, there needs
Mhm.
to be some adjustment. It's just not one-sided, right? It's both. It's both. It's both and if you really look at it. There's a story, I don't know if you probably, it's an old story, but it was developed by William about W. Roosevelt Robinson, I think is I'm probably butchering his name, but it was the story of an elephant and a giraffe as a way to think about it. And I'll just briefly, I don't want to, belabor the story, but it started off with an elephant and a giraffe that won the Giraffe of the Year award for his home. He designed this incredible house that it had all the features and amenities that would help a giraffe. And his friend, the elephant, was coming down the street and he said, "Oh, I love the elephant. He's a great friend. Let me invite him in." But as soon as he started to come into the house, he couldn't get to the door, right? Because the door
Mhm.
wasn't designed to fit him. And then when he finally did get through the door, he started breaking things because the stairs and the rooms and the space wasn't designed for him to be in that space, for the elephant to be in that space. And the
Mhm.
giraffe immediately thought, well, elephant, maybe we can send you to ballet lessons, or maybe we can help you lose weight, or maybe we can do all these things to help you because I want you here, but
Mhm.
obviously you need to make adjustments to fit. And the moral of the story is an elephant can fit in a house built by a giraffe, that you have to make sure that the house itself is developed and structured in a way that allows for others to be in it, as opposed to trying to change the other and keep the house the same way that it is. So it's a both conversation.
I absolutely love that story because, even when you said, oh, well, we need to take the elephant to dance lessons, right? Because it's a lack, like they lack grace
Yes.
or whatever it is. I'm like,
Right.
do they
Exactly.
though? And when you said that, because and I why that clicked for me was, and I said this at the top, right? I was always the employee that bucked the system, right? If something didn't make sense to me or just was inequitable, I was always the one to kind of speak up about it.
Hmm.
And what came back to me several times was, um, she will never be promoted because she speaks up too much. She needs to learn more about leadership, right? She needs, and all of these things. When I tell you that I've gone to every leadership development program certification that you can think of, because I'm like, if y'all gonna pay for it, sure, I will go to it. But there's nothing
Hmm.
here that you're teaching me that I don't already know. And so what I'm hearing is, it's not that I needed to go to dance lessons. It was the space wasn't created for individuals that want to push back, that see something that could happen in a different way, right? That's not psychologically safe to speak up,
Right.
right? So I'm seeing and hearing all of these things. And so, Dr. Carol, one of the things that I want to really hear from you about is what I talked about. Oftentimes, especially women of color are sent to these programs to go learn to be more of a leader,
Hmm.
i.e., how to fit more into the status quo and not buck the system, right? It's an assimilation process versus a way to kind of tap into their natural abilities. How could that be detrimental to that individual and to the organization?
Well, what it does is that it continually builds up an animosity um, within the individual who's constantly being pointed to say, "You're the problem, you're the problem, you're the problem."
Mm,
And so over time, there is resentment. Over time, the individual, where even if there are developmental opportunities, or even potential developmental opportunities, they can't even absorb that because it becomes a fight and a struggle, right? And
mhm,
it becomes a either or, I'm right, you're wrong, you're just oppressing me, you're putting me down. And then the person can start, rethinking their own abilities, rethinking, their own thoughts, their own mindset, their own capabilities. It can undermine their confidence, right? When the organization kind of colludes and comes together to try to either scapegoat or push the person out, which is what's happening. And it's because the organization hasn't taken the time to really examine itself and whether or not it's an open organization in terms of having the ability for open dialogue, to have critical conversations, to really listen. But what it also does in some ways is that starts to impede the individual's ability to really speak to the issues in a way that can be heard by the organization, right? It may have started off by saying, hey, I'm seeing an issue that doesn't seem quite right. I just would love to have more conversation or dialogue around it. And then it becomes, I'm not participating, and because you all are just, racist, and you're not going to be doing anything that I think is right. So screw you all. And I'm just going to not participate and be obstinate and not believe that anything I say is going to make a difference. So it can really impede the person's ability to show up in a way that can have an open conversation, because now they feel very victimized, and they also feel very targeted. And when you have, if you think about it, if you have somebody caged in a corner that you have kind of beaten on over and over again, of course they are going to bite at you and bark at you and ready to rip your eyes out, right? It's just natural behavior. But then what happens is the organization says, now look at them. They've created the situation. And they haven't seen that they've colluded and been a part of the creation of that. They're just now looking at the person as being the problem, and not that the organization has really had a part of it. So it really can impact the psyche of the individual over time to really impact their effectiveness in the organization.
Yeah. And the flip side of that too, on the organizational side, is when you remain in the status quo like this, innovation doesn't happen there.
Innovation doesn't happen. Creativity suffers. They spit the person out, and then what they do is they try to find someone that fits the bill externally, but internally will make no waves, will not talk back. That so that they don't have to change. So they maintain the status quo. They keep the giraffe house. They don't start rebuilding or revamping. They just keep looking for who they can fit in to the house, as opposed to really looking at themselves to say, how can we create something that we can have a space where if someone is feeling this way, that we become self-aware enough to examine what's going on, and what part did we play. And that type of self-awareness is what a lot of organizations don't do. And I'd say organizations, let me just be clear, a lot of leaders within organizations do not do, because they either don't have the time, they don't have the bandwidth, or they just don't want to engage the conversation because of their own internalized issues that they haven't been able to face or deal with.
Yeah. They lack the competencies. I mean, that's a lot of it, as well too. They are not equipped to handle a lot of those issues or challenges. And so, when you talk about leadership development, that's one of those pieces of that. It's, can you, I was about to curse, but can you sit in your own stuff, right? Can you understand the impact that you have in the shadow that you cast?
And the reason they don't have the competencies is they don't have to have the competencies. I mean, let's be very real. Like, if I don't have to engage in this discomfort, why would I have to? Right. And so the difference is the bulk of the patriarchy, imperialist kind of hierarchical militaristic organizational structures that actually exist today is so in the majority that they don't have to deal with it. They can just drive you out and bring someone in who will just be a yes man, and not cause them to have to engage in that type of discomfort and self-engagement.
So it's interesting that you say that, because this week, well, not this week, last week, my days are blending together. Last week, I was having a conversation with someone that said, yes, that absolutely has been our MO historically, right? Someone is not a good culture fit, so we'll just figure out a way to kind of push them on till we find someone that is a culture fit. And I challenged them to, okay, first of all, is it a culture fit that you want, or do you want a culture add? You want someone that's going to be able to add to the culture and create and help you all grow and expand. I said, but the other piece of that is, what are you really looking for? Right? Are you really looking for someone that is going to contribute, or are you looking for a cog in the wheel? Because if you're just looking for a cog in the wheel, you may find someone, but again, that's that innovation piece. But this person kind of said, but we're realizing we can't do that anymore because this new generation of folks are holding us accountable in ways that we have never been held accountable for.
That is so true.
Right. And so when you're looking at this generational diversity, you're looking at what leadership development looks like now, this excuse or the out of, oh, okay, we need to just put you into a leadership program because we know all the things that we need to know, is no longer the case. Right now, I'm getting lots of calls like, okay, we're having issues around communication across generations. How can you help us with that? So now it's, using your analogy, now they're realizing, okay, it's not just us changing this living room to meet this elephant. We got to change this whole house in order to make the, to meet the needs of this elephant. And by doing so, we need contractors that understand elephants.
Exactly. And rhinoceros and hippopotamus and zebra and right, because the house is not just about the two. And you're completely right that the new it's funny. I was having a conversation actually with the CEO of a company, and he was describing just how painful it's been for him to work with this younger generation that is calling them out on every turn. Right. And so while the older generation kind of learn how to go along to get along, as you said, the younger generation is like, absolutely not. And so before, like in the older like boomer or Gen Xers would maybe speak truth to power and then get ostracized out. But now you have a whole collective who are calling people on it to actually say that things need to change, that things need to be different. I mean, and they're blowing their minds. I mean, we have identity around pronouns, and LGBTQIA issues like non-binary. Like there are so many new vernacular, if you will, or experiences that are being brought to the table that organizations have got to readjust the way that they're thinking and looking about it. But the problem that I've always seen fundamentally that continues to exist is the conversations around race continue to be the most challenging, right? While organizations are struggling and leaders are struggling with the new generation, if you notice they are more apt to try to have those type of conversations, but when it comes to race, it's a problem. And then so at the intersection of race and gender, it becomes very problematic. So if you've seen like the recent McKinsey report that came out on women in the workplace, it talked about very blatantly and boldly that whereas white women are making progress, Black women of color, but Black women in particularly are lagging behind. Like it's getting worse.
Yeah.
And it's because the issues around race are still very taboo. And organizations are a microcosm, of the entire society. And as a society, particularly in this country, we don't like to have the conversation because people have all kind of issues and thoughts and feelings around it. And in order not to deal with those, or face those, they just don't like to talk about it. So while we can even talk about equity at some level from a gender perspective, while we can talk about disability or ageism, or we could talk about identity issues, right, and identity politics, when it comes to race, that still continues to be an issue. Women of color are still facing microaggressions, are still facing biases. We still have to, from organizational perspectives, have to prove our worth versus what they do with most other men is to see their potential, right? And the problem with a lot of that is that we internalize that. And definitely the generations of us have internalized it. But if we don't really force the envelope in the conversation, we'll have another generation internalizing that they're problematic as opposed to really for once having the conversation. And I applaud organizations that are doing it. But another report that came out by DDI around diversity and equity saying that a lot of organizations, whereas maybe years ago there were maybe 20% 20% of organizations had DEI initiatives and efforts, is down to 15%. So
Yeah.
people are reducing or cutting
Cutting.
or
Yeah.
letting go all of the work around that, and it's because they don't see it as as a necessity, right?
Yeah.
If it's not my problem, right, then
And it's
it's
not a
not a
problem.
problem.
Yeah.
And that is the problem. And so you're right. Women are fleeing the workplace. Women of color are not being promoted into upper echelons to really change the conversation so that we can design these houses that make room for other people because they don't want to deal with it. And the impact of that, it's scary, but the impact of it is like I feel in some ways we're going back as opposed to making some progress that we did since, George Floyd.
So I want to go back a little bit because what you just said, I think, is so critical. And for so many organizations, they use leadership development as a punitive measure. They use coaching as a punitive measure.
Right.
How can we kind of flip the script so that women of color, particularly Black women, are getting these tools and resources in a way that empower them versus the organization seeing it as a check the box because we're doing all we can, right, to fix them. So
Yeah.
how do we kind of flip that script? Because I think that there's so many Black women in particular, but women of color that are kind of in this funky place, right?
Yeah.
Where we want to advocate for ourselves, we want to do all of these things. We have the system
Mm-hmm.
that is hindering us from doing that. And so how do they maximize on these opportunities?
Yeah, so there's a two-pronged thing here. Often when I get asked to coach, a woman of color, because for leadership development and coaching and development, my first question is always about tell me the context in which she's in, because
Mhm,
it never happens in isolations, and I need to talk to
mhm,
people and give you feedback on what's creating the experience, right? So that's one thing. But the other thing for women, there's two things that I think are really helpful. Um, from a leadership development perspective, if you will. And the first is how do we help women of color engage in self care
mm,
and the ability um, to kind of gain the tools to weather the environment around them. Because what happens is the environment becomes so toxic that we can't see
mhm,
ourselves. We're just in reactionary mode to everything that happens, right? We wake up and we're upset, we're
mhm,
overwhelmed, we're burnt out, we're frustrated, we're trying to beat our heads against the wall because our focus is on the problem. Our focus is on the system. Our focus is on the injustice, right? Our focus is on how we're being treated. Our focus is on how dare they do this to me and why are they doing this to me? And it's a constant battle. When for me, what I work with women on is the focus is how do I, in the midst of this, still retain my confidence, my self worth, my self esteem, and to
mhm.
see this as not a reflection of me, but just a situation that I'm in the middle of that I need to navigate,
Yes.
right? So, how do I create the self protective mechanisms that don't impede or impact my confidence, my capabilities, and my visibility? And once I get that, right? Once I am able to do that, where I'm able to be in the situation and see it for what it is, which is it's the organization that's just not in a position to
Mm,
respect and hold what I bring to the table,
mhm.
then I say, look for another opportunity where that can happen. Because once you're able to do that in the next opportunity or the next venture, you can then interview them in a way to gain a greater understanding is if this is a place that can really support and hold what I bring to the table.
I
Right.
love
So
that.
that's
Yeah.
the big piece of it, right? So that we don't then start to internalize it and then become victimized to what the organization is doing. Because then we'll bring that into it. And a lot of women they'll just quit and they'll go someplace else, but they're carrying all of
They
that
carry that
baggage
trauma.
with them,
They
all
carry
of
it
that
with them.
trauma into the next organization. So then what happens? They come into an organization that may be open and willing to have a conversation,
Yeah.
and they are suspicious, They are
Yes.
side-eyeing them every day of the way,
Yes.
and they're looking for opportunities to fight because that is what they have been conditioned to feel. So we
Yes.
have to be able to figure out and give them the tools on how, in the midst of this, can I still reconnect to my self-worth, my self-confidence, and knowing what I bring to the table so I can disassociate this from who I am.
Yes. That part. Because I think that's what I see so often is that piece. I am my job.
Mhm.
Like I am so connected and invested in this role, this position, this organization.
Yeah.
And they become so enmeshed in that they forget who they are
Yes.
and can't define who they are outside of it.
Yes, absolutely. And for me, my coaching is always, how can I help you become the CEO of you? Right?
Yes.
How do I help
Mhm.
you step, like, it's not about the company you're with. Even if I'm coaching people who want to get promoted in the company and they do love their company, I'm like, yeah, but you want to differentiate yourself from the company and see
Yes.
you in terms of what value you bring to the company, what results you deliver for the company. Because if you can see that, then you can see yourself doing that any place. It's not just the organization that somehow or other is giving you the lifeline or the lifeblood to be
Mhm.
successful. No, you're bringing success to the organization. You're contributing your brilliance in such a way that allows that organization to be successful. So I help them to just totally take their eyes off of the external and keep it completely focused on the internal. And once they can master that, then potentially, depending on the organization, they can begin to navigate and move through the channels of that system in a way that they couldn't before.
Yes, all of that, because capitalism tells us that our organization defines who we are.
Oh, yeah, not at all.
Right.
It's a
I work
bartering.
for
It's a
right. I work
bartering
for
system.
X. So
Right.
because of that, that's my value. No, you bring value to that organization. So how do you like shift that mindset? And so I so appreciate that.
Yeah, but we're
Um
so conditioned in our society, right? You
so
go to network
conditioned.
and the first questions are, tell me what you do, tell me where you work. Tell me
Yeah,
what you do, tell me where
what
you
you do.
work. Right?
Not
And
even
so
your
it's
name.
not even your name. It's like, what do you do? Where do you work? And so we are so conditioned to put our value in
Yeah.
organizations or titles or education or these all these external factors because our society has deemed what is a good credential, what is a good
Mhm,
title, what is an important title, what is
mm,
an important position or an important company to work for, that we strive to meet and match against that external validation when what we should be saying is, like I always say, I'm an organizational and human development expert, right? That's
mhm.
me, that's what I do, and I could do that for anybody anywhere, right?
Right.
I'm not beholden to an organization. They didn't give me the tools to get that. I have been able to get into that organization and bring something forward that's been able to impact them.
Yeah. And I think, something else that you said that ties into this as well too, it's understanding that the self-care piece of that, because if holding the value and title of X organization checks that box, but it doesn't check the box if it is a detriment to your health, if it's a detriment to your mind, if it's a
Yeah.
detriment, in other ways to you. And so what are you willing to put yourself through to say that you're connected to this organization? So I appreciate that separation piece,
Yes.
because I had to go through that, some years ago to realize that was not my identity. And I had a manager,
Mhm.
not even a manager, a mentor, um, who said to me, I need you to be the CEO of SachaThompson.com. And it took a while for that to click for me. And then once
Yeah,
it did, I was just like, oh,
exactly.
I got this.
Yeah.
I got this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
whatever
always
was
say,
happening.
yeah, completely. And I tell my clients that your career, the work you do in the world, is a piece of the ecosystem of your life.
Hmm.
Right? It is not all of it's not all work over here, life over here, or whatever over here, right? It's a piece of the greater ecosystem. So there needs to be alignment. And if one piece of the pie or that ecosystem is off, it will throw off everything else. So I remember I was in a role when I was an associate dean, and I was in an environment that was like gaslighting and a little bit
Mm,
toxic. And I remember my dean was like, You're always sick." Because I would always get physically, I'd
yep,
catch colds like nobody's business. I get the flu, I have bronchitis. It felt like clockwork.
yep.
And what happens is your body, if
Starts
you
to break
aren't
down.
cognitively admitting to what's happening, your body will give you clues and messages that something is off. And
Yeah.
it was a misalignment. It was a misalignment. And so we have to look at, how does the career fit within the greater ecosystem? And is there alignment across that ecosystem? Because
Right.
one or the other, if one or the other is off balance, there's going to be a problem. And the same with your home life. If you need adjustments in your home life for whatever reason or whatever's going on, you need to have a career that allows for that as well, so
Yeah.
that you can have that balance in a certain way. I hate the word balance really, but it's more alignment,
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't allow you to have one overshadow and overtake all the others.
Absolutely. So if there was, well, I was gonna say one, but I'm gonna say two. If there are two pieces of advice that you could give a woman of color that is kind of in this place of, you're speaking my language, right? I'm feeling this misalignment here. Um, what would those two things be?
So first, ask yourself some important questions and answer them honestly, right? Ask yourself, what do I think about most in the day? What consumes
Mm,
most of my attention day and night? If you say it is work or the challenges of work or the problems of work, then that's a problem. That's an indication that you're not focusing on yourself and your own self development and self worth and self care. And you're too focused on external factors, levers, and validation. And the reason that you want to understand that is because if the external factors shift, right, the wind blows here, so will you. If the wind
mhm.
blows there, so will you. And you want to be solid and stable. So no matter what's whirling around you, you have an ability to be centered and focused on you. So ask yourself those questions in terms of what's consuming you. What do you think about day and night? What's keeping you up at night, if you will? Like those are the
Mhm.
first questions. And then the second question, the second part of that is to really get clear on, what do you want out of your life and career?
Yes.
What's important and valuable for you? Let go of the company, let go of the
Mhm.
title, let go of all of the external stuff, and ask yourself, what do I want? What brings me joy? What
Yes.
is valuable to me? What's important to me? Right? Where do I see myself going? What do I see myself doing? Because that's a question, surprisingly, many women do not answer for
Nope.
themselves.
Not at
They
all.
answer the question, what should I do next? What should the next opportunity be? What's the next
Yep.
thing I should go after? But they don't ask themselves, what do I want?
Yeah.
Right? And so when you can really get clear on those two things, it'll give you the depth of self awareness you need to make greater decisions for yourself and not become victimized to everything that's happened around you.
We're so aligned. We're so aligned because I often will ask coaching clients, especially earlier when I started coaching, like, what brings you joy? And we would have a whole conversation about that. And I read people's like body language. I'm really into
Mhm.
body language. And I was like, you know what? What I'm seeing is you're glowing, you're excited, you're passionate. Like I see all of that. When I see you talk about work, it is depleting. Like I see all of that. So how do we shift that? How do we bring more joy, right,
Yeah.
into your life, into your space? And it's exactly what you're saying. It's that misalignment. It's that
Mhm.
refocus on self versus what my mama say I need to do, or my auntie say I need to do, or
Yes.
my cousin 3 times
Yes.
removed did this, so I need, no, they not you. So
Right. Or what society tells you, right? When I
right.
stopped practicing law, and I practiced for 10 years, but I haven't practiced for 20. And people are still
Mm,
like, you're not a lawyer, right? So don't get it twisted that if you are in a position of power and you're like, I don't even want this job. Like I would rather be doing this. people are going to push back and say, what? But look at
Yeah.
you. You're at this level and you make this money or things of that nature. And I'm not saying that may be the thing, but really get in touch with what brings you joy and what's important for you. That is so critical, because
Yeah.
if you keep going after external things, then it's never going to fill you up. And you are never going to find fulfillment unless you start internally to figure out what matters to you. And here's the other thing I want to say about that. What matters to you and what's important to you and what brings you joy may change.
Yes.
The other piece of my human development is the fact that over the lifespan, things change. And
Mm.
this idea that there's a perfect job or an ideal position is ludicrous,
Mhm.
because think about it. When you were 20, you probably thought you were in your ideal job, or maybe you had an idea of what your ideal job would be. But as you turn 40, that may completely
Things
change. Or
change.
once you start having kids, or once you have you're in a relationship, or you start caring for aging parents, or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, give yourself the opportunity to continue to ask yourself the questions, because over time and over your lifespan, that will shift.
Yes.
Particularly in the midlife pivot, things are going to shift for you. What was so critical and important for you before, you may think means nothing to you now. So this isn't a
Mhm.
one or done proposition. This is a continual evolution and a constant query that you want to engage in, to make sure that you're always checking in to make sure you're in the right place and on the right track. A lot of times when women come to me, with this, like, I'm not sure what I should do, it's because they've kind of outgrown what they've been doing. And they are
Right.
afraid to transition into something that's
Take that
unknown,
next step.
right?
Yeah.
You don't know
Yeah.
what that is. But as I often say, everything you've done in your life, you've done not knowing anything about it or how you would do it. So you have so much evidence to support the fact that you can step
Yeah.
into the unknown confidently, because you're not moving into a place where you have no skills, knowledge, and abilities. You're bringing all of that with you into that
Mhm.
next iteration of what you can do. And
Yeah.
be careful about who you share your dreams and ideas with, because haters
Woo.
will hate. And
That part.
people, I always say, people do not have the ability to see beyond their own limitations.
That
And if
part.
I feel limited and you're talking about something beyond what I could see myself doing, I'm going to try to pull you back to what
Mhm.
I think is possible when
Or
you
was
may
safe.
have, or is safe,
Yeah.
versus you stepping into the possibilities that you believe about yourself. So watch
Mhm.
who you share your dreams and visions with as
Yeah.
well.
That circle should be super small.
Super tiny. I
Okay.
agree.
So you actually kind of segued into my last question for you. Like, what do you do to take care of yourself? Like, how do you fill your cup?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it's there's simple things. I love to unplug and get a massage and
Mm.
have like a spa day, or like a movie and dinner day, for myself, or travel. So I'm either out somewhere exploring another country. I think so far I've been to like 16 different countries.
Wow.
So I love traveling and learning about different cultures. But if I'm doing kind of a everyday take care, it's like a spa relaxation, or it's like a dinner and a movie. And I mean, I dress up, I like watch my movie, I go to a great restaurant, I make a reservation, whether it's alone or with my partner or with somebody else. Like,
I,
I take care of me. I make sure that I disconnect and take care of me.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Dr. Carol, so if people wanted to find you, follow up, learn more, how can they do that?
Yeah, I think the very first place is to go to my website, www.carolparkerwalsh.com. But you can also, and if you go there, you'll find my social. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn primarily, as well as Instagram. I'm on YouTube, but if you start on the website, it'll take you to all the other places that I tend to show up. So, yeah.
Wonderful. We could have gone on for like another half hour
Oh my
because this
goodness.
is just we might need to do a part two, because this is something, I think is just so critical. And even when we
Yeah.
were prepping for this, I was just like, "Ooh, what happens when we get in our own ways?" And we didn't even touch that part of it. So I
Yeah.
definitely think we could do a part two. But thank you so much for joining me today, joining us today. I think you dropped so many just nuggets for people to think about, and also the importance of having a coach, right? Having someone that can kind of help prompt you with some of those questions. Because I know that without the coaches that I've had in my career, I wouldn't have been able to make some of the choices or even seen the possibilities,
Oh,
that were
absolutely.
ahead of
I have
me.
always had a coach, and I would never not have a coach because they can see me objectively, they can see blind spots, they can
Mhm.
listen, just as you were saying earlier, as someone is sharing something, getting it reflected back to say, here's what I'm seeing, in a way
Yeah.
that we can't see. We're too close to our own stuff. One coach told me once that your superpowers don't work on you. So while
Ooh,
you may be
I love
brilliant,
that.
I know. So while you may be brilliant in helping other people and helping them solve problems, it doesn't mean that when it comes to yourself that you can have the same objectivity with yourself.
Mhm.
So having a coach is so powerful. I think about people like Serena Williams and all these incredible people who are success. Oprah, for God's sake, always talked about
Mhm.
having a coach, right? These people who are brilliant in and of themselves, who help and impact and inspire so many people, but they work with someone to help them improve
Yeah,
upon the thing that makes them great. And that's what a coach does.
I love it. Thank you so much for being with us today. I mean, just nuggets upon nuggets upon nuggets. I'm loving it.
Thank you
So
so much for having me.
thank you. And thank you all for being with us this week. I hope that you are writing things down or sharing this with others that you think may find, the nuggets here beneficial. You can find us here every Tuesday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern. Again, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast, we are here every Tuesday. And so thank you again, and we will see you. Until next time, have a good one.